Welcome to Unmasking the Trans Movement. Now, here's your host, Brad Wilder.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Yes, we are live for our Sunday night Q&A session. It's going to be a great show. We've got a great guest along with John Euler here with us tonight, and that is a special guest who's been on the show quite a few times, but not live, so something a little bit new tonight. Ute Heggen is with us. She's a trans widow. We'll talk a little bit more about what a trans widow is and how, her life has been affected by the trans movement. If you're just joining us tonight, you're seeing us possibly for the first time on YouTube. We do have our own website at UnmaskingTheTransMovement.com. You can also visit us on our BitChute and Rumble channels as well. And we also have a YouTube channel that gives you all the updates there too. So welcome to the show tonight. We've got our chat up and running, and individuals will be able to jump in and ask some questions along the way. We'll get things started tonight. Let me welcome both John Euler and Ute Heggen. John and Ute, great to have you on the program on this Sunday night. It's a long weekend up here in Canada, but hey, that's okay. We love to have these discussions. Doesn't matter what day it is. We're here for the women and children and the protection of women and children. And we've said that from day one, haven't we, John?
There you go, Brad. And again, that speaks to your commitment. Thank you. We couldn't do this without you. And Ute, welcome back. You are a repeat guest.
Yes.
For us. And you are our resident expert, the subject that very little people think about, because this has been, in my estimation, there's no other way to put it. There's been a cover-up. And the cover-up is the silencing of those most impacted by the trans deception. Along with the trans deception comes the pushers of all sorts of deviant things. They're targeting kids in school with deviant sex ed. They are targeting women's sports. Here in the States, they're going after Title IX. President Biden has seen fit to allow a bunch of sexually deviant men cross-dressing in women's underwear and drag to get into and ruin women's sports. And our contention is they're actually, that's just the preliminary heat for them. The goal is access to the locker rooms and showers with their cell phones. So they're taking films of these women and traumatizing them. And they're putting or forcing deviant men into women's prisons. So this is very far-reaching, but one of the issues that is rarely ever discussed is really the elephant in the middle of the room, in my estimation, which is the harm being perpetrated upon wives and families by sexually deviant men that have become steeped in pornography, so much so that they now have become twisted and they violate easily and readily their marital vows. So now they are ripping a family apart or families apart, but now on top of everything else, the wives are told in many different ways, overtly and covertly, to basically sit down, shut up, like it, and go along with it. Don't be a problem. And that's the ultimate in gaslighting, and that's why we really want to feature the issue of what's called trans widows. And Ute, you have lived this. You, unfortunately, have kind of had to blaze the trail long before this was really on anybody's radar screen. So welcome. You're an author, and we are here to have you feature your groundbreaking research that those deviant sexologists and others that want to claim, shall we say, that nobody else can do any research except for them on deviant men. Okay? But no, your research is groundbreaking. So we're going to get into that. So welcome back, Ute, to our program. You are an author. I'm going to hold your book up, by the way.
Yes,
I'm going to recommend
I will too.
Everybody do it. Make sure it doesn't. There we go. In the
Yes.
Curated Woods. So that was really your journey through the healing process of having your spouse, who you trusted, who made some promises at an altar, all of a sudden, little by little, morphed into a man that you barely recognized, and he became half the man you thought you knew. So welcome, and let's also talk. Sorry.
Right.
So
Yes.
let's also,
Yes, just to give the complete information about the book, it is available since 2022. When I published it, I self-published. I will not make any money from this, but I feel that I have to be the pioneer on this path. And I have now found out that, yes, indeed, there are other women who are traumatized by this experience. The publisher is iUniverse. That's iUniverse.com, and it is available from Amazon and all the usual vendors. And you can get the soft cover, I think, all over the world, as well as the ebook on Kindle. Let's see, I have a YouTube channel myself, which is the 4 words trans widow Ute Heggen. Ute being spelled Uteheggen, meaning in Norwegian something like out in the hedge, which I'm a gardener. Of course, it's a pen name. Almost all of us have to work under a pen name because otherwise the trolls will come after our families and goodness knows. And so many trans widows are really afraid to speak out about their experiences. And I profile them with the answers to my survey, which I developed, called 20 Questions to Ask a Trans Widow. Now,
and Ute, if I might, as we get underway,
yeah.
I want on your behalf to let people know, anybody that's listening, the trans widows, and again, that's a euphemistic term for wives that have been betrayed by sexually deviant men that are cross-dressing. And they are told to sit down and shut up. They're told to go along with it. We've talked about in the past, right, that the deviant husbands will find therapists that will put pressure on the wives. So what you have embarked on is you've created a survey. Mm-hmm. It's a one-of-a-kind survey. So any woman, and we'll let you talk about how they can participate, but you are still taking participants to gather really what will be the largest sample. So it's a ongoing research study of those women whose husbands betrayed them and became these trans deviant guys, so that finally the truth behind the scenes can be revealed and the wives can have their stories told and their sufferings really shown to the world that it is the wives, it is the kids that deserve our sympathies, not these deviant men. These are not nice, sensitive men. These are sexually deviant men, and we need to change the narrative, and so you're here to do so. So why don't you share, how can a betrayed wife of one of these sexually deviant men, a trans guy, cross-dressing guy, so how can a wife participate in your study?
Yes. So I only take the responses of women who have left, because if they're in it, it's possibly too dangerous for them to be in contact with me by email or so on, because of the husband is probably spying on her to make sure that she's not doing that. So on my blog, which is a WordPress blog, it's long, but it starts off with my author name, Ute Heggen, grasswidow.wordpress.com. Why grass widow? That is an archaic term that was used going back to 1528 for women who had separated from their husbands. Their husbands were not dead, but it was a term indicating that that's an honorable woman who is just has, for whatever reason, separated from her spouse at a time when, often divorce wasn't even allowed. And I was afraid to use the word trans widow, although I was aware that this had become the common term for us ex-wives of cross-dressers. I was afraid that my book might be booted out of the sales opportunities of Amazon and all those, because at that time they were trying to do that to Helen Joyce and Abigail Schreier and all that with their books, kind of, showing the tip of the iceberg of this cult of misdiagnosis. So there's a contact form on the WordPress blog, and that WordPress blog, the Ute Heggen grasswidow.wordpress.com, is always listed in the notes of my YouTube channel videos, and that's Trans Widow Ute Heggen. So, and I now have data from 60 women. And what's interesting for me is there must be validity to it, because the percentages of women affected in certain ways has mainly stayed constant ever since I had about 24 responses, and now I have 60. So, but you had mentioned something that you read on Twitter, and I'm sort of thinking that might be good to look at right now.
And I want people to understand the importance of your research and the value and the validity and reliability. There's two ways to do research. One is quantitative, the other is qualitative. You're doing quantitative analysis, you're asking pretty much straightforward questions. Qualitative is just as valued. You mentioned that James Cantor tried to shut you down. If he wants to come on our program and debate this matter, he's more than welcome to.
Yeah, we'd love to have you.
Qualitative research is very unique and very important because it brings out truths, it brings out themes, and the times that we're supposed to believe these sensitive guys. Why? Well, they say so. Self-reports. So it has a lot of validity. Qualitative analysis. Yours is more quantitative, but the numbers you have already, 60.
Yes.
Michael Bailey, deviant sexologist, Dr. Michael Bailey, who's done all sorts of deviant work, in my estimation,
That's right. Yeah.
Joined forces with GenSpec, written an article with Stella O'Malley, and they had 73 participants. So you're up to 60.
Yeah.
So we're looking for more. So the more participants you have, the more valid. But as you've just said, you reached a certain threshold where it's almost predictable and nothing changes. It just reinforces that this is true. But what you referenced, and I'll bring it up now, is ironically just a couple days ago on Twitter, and so here's my little Twitter page, somebody posted this. Hazel Appleyard posted this, and we're going to go to the body of this content, and you could see Hazel said, this one hurt me to read, and I'm not going to lie. It says this: cost of transition and giving up my dreams. That, by the way, is such a theme, what you're going to tackle it with. Okay, this is a woman, okay, this is a wife talking, okay, or asking, how do you deal with the cost of your partner's transition prior to her? No, that's him. Okay, prior to him coming out, we were hoping to buy a bigger condo, replace our car, and save for traveling. Now, what I see in our future is money spent on surgeries. I know that gender affirming is super important. Oh gosh, okay, you're going to talk to that, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay, and I feel like an a-hole for even being upset about this. Oh, this gaslighting drives me nuts. Okay, but what about other things? Surgeries are in the 5 figures. That's nothing to scoff at. We're currently debt-free, but we have modest salaries, and know we will one day need a mortgage. However, we had planned for everything else, car, travel, etc., to be paid outright, as we are very uncomfortable with debt. I know how to just... I don't know how to just let go of the dreams I had for a home and travel. I'm having a hard time letting this go. I don't know if it's because I, deep down, wish there weren't transitioning. I feel like I can't say anything because their transition is arguably the most important thing. I want him to be happy, but I also had dreams. I don't know how we can possibly afford all this. I'm just feeling very lost, but also very selfish, ashamed, and confused. Thoughts, advice. Am I the only one? Am I an a-hole? Can you tell me? Please help me sort this out. Ute, you're the right one. Help her.
Yeah, really. She needs to pay attention to her own self and to recognize that he is very much engaging in financial and narcissistic abuse. It is apparent that there are no children in this particular situation. When there are children, it becomes very, very complicated. And you wouldn't, I mean, if she could find a friend, I don't even know about therapists anymore, but if she could find a friend who will, be her wise truth teller and who will say, look, would you get involved with someone if you just met them and they wanted to date you? Would you get involved with a person who's doing all this stuff who, I'm saying to myself, okay, my understanding is that the number at this point, it's probably gone up, that it's, somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 for the below the belt surgery.
We've heard 70,000 by Scott.
Oh, okay. So there's been inflation. Okay. So, and then, if this dude is looking for facial feminization, first of all, he's talking about permanently damaging his sinuses and nerves in his jaw and stuff like that could lead to neuroma, very, very dangerous kind of stuff, this plastic surgery. And then there's the boob jobs, which the breast implants need to be replaced every 10 years. And so my ex-husband, whom I call Nettie in my book, is on, I guess, his third set of breast implants. And I said to myself, I mean, she's very averse to taking on debt, which is a good way to live. And so, that's not going to work. I mean, she actually needs to listen to herself. If she just listened to herself and said, I got to get out of this. And I think that this is part of the value of what I'm doing is it appears that this woman is unaware of women who leave, right? She is saying all these gaslit, brainwashed, indoctrinated things like, I know that it's super important to affirm. I know that, and it's like...
Think about how she has been so inundated by this false and fraudulent narrative. The perps and perp apologists those that are going to cross boundaries, those that are the manipulators, the cult leaders, the deceivers, the sociopaths, they're all going to go after the intended target of opportunities, I mean, in this case, their spouse, the spouses, the wives, the woman's intuition. So it dumbs down the reality testing. Right.
Well, that's gaslighting. That's the classic movie Gaslight, where the husband, as soon as the street light, which is from gas, it's literally a verb that came from a movie called Gaslight, which had Ingrid Bergman in it, and she was the gaslit wife. And he's the husband when he comes home and the light outside turns on, then he starts in on her, criticizing her and telling her that she's going crazy. And then she eventually thinks that she is going crazy. And so, this is narcissistic psychopathy, if you ask me. It's, and what's really awful about it, we mentioned, these psychologists and so on, is that it is sanctioned by them. It's sanctioned abuse of your wife. And I think that, quite a few of us, there's, the questions that I wish I had added into the survey are, I did ask about, being gaslit by therapists and so on, but the other thing that I'm finding that is a little bit of a...
I just thought I'd bring up the name of the movie.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go.
Charles Boyer, who is a great...
That's where the term comes from.
Yes.
It really is. I watched it with my wife, and it's very compelling. So if anybody wants to know where that term comes,
yes.
There we go.
That's right. So And there are the trans allies who are kind of the worst. I mean, I've experienced that, where.
These are who I call the perp apologists.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. Sounds good. I like that.
They're aggressive.
Yes. Right. But one of the things that the women talk about, and in a way I'm doing both quantitative and qualitative research because I have data, but I also have a lot of narrative from them. And I am intending to put this all into a second book. And I have already gone into contract with my publisher, again, a self-publish, where I pay. But it's going to be called Trans Widow Chronicles, Leaving and Healing. And I'm going to put all the narratives kind of together in, conceptual categories, and the one question that I didn't ask, and I'm finding a lot of women have had this experience where he did not physically assault her, stopped just short of it, threw things that landed, on the wall next to her, or punched.
You're being way too polite, meaning he threw things at the wall, barely missed her head, put holes in the walls, right? And so to your credit, if anybody wants to say you're biased, you're not biased whatsoever, right? Because
I go
people need to
overboard.
understand these are violent guys, these are threatening guys, punching holes in walls. They're traumatizing these women to shut them up and break their boundaries down. These are sexually deviant men, and you guys have been so gaslit. And so you're doing a wonderful job. I'll try to contain myself, but bless your heart. You were just describing, I kind of threw a thing. Now these are.
Well, the thing is, I mean, what you said to me when I asked you about this is, you said to me, a woman who has been subjected to that should go to the police for an order of protection and get out.
Absolutely.
Because you don't know when he's going to actually succeed in you being the target, in hitting the target. So
because pornography, all these guys 100% are into, and have been for years, progressively twisted and deviant porn. Deviant pornography eventually and always creates a deep malevolence toward women. That's why they are increasing their degradation toward the wife. And they think it nothing to put a hand around a woman's throat.
Yes.
We used to call that sexual assault.
Right. Yes. There are 5 cases in the 60 of choking. And with about 3 of those, the police got called. One of them included then a subsequent rape. They won't prosecute. The law enforcement will not prosecute these guys. These guys turn around and say that the wife assaulted them. Sure. And that's, he said that I assaulted him, and he thought of a real cooked up story. He said that I forcibly ejected him from our home when actually the children and I were out of town for the entire month of June of 1995 so that he could move out, because I asked him to move out. If I had said, if certain things happen again, you're going to need to move out. Let's try to have as most amicable as possible divorce, And then he said that I forcibly ejected him.
These guys are such professional grade deceivers and manipulators, and it starts with how they hide their deviance, their deviant activities and pornography.
Right.
So Ute, I've got a question for you really quickly. That is, with regards
what was that, Brad?
Well, with regards to your ex-husband, at what point did you realize that he needed mental help? I mean, this is mental health. We bring it into trans, we bring it into cross-dressing, but the reality is there's the mental health side of things. And at some point, you recognize that he needed mental help, and obviously he didn't get it. The help that he got was to just keep the transition going. And cross-dressing and transitioning are 2 different things. He went for full surgeries, or he went for surgeries. So that means that he was transitioning into that. So he wasn't just playing a role of cross-dressing or having sexually deviant fantasies about pornography in that regard. He was literally engaged deep into it, right?
Right. And the thing is, what you're bringing up, like a few different threads here, because also the therapists are basically the salesman for the surgeons.
Right.
Right? They're peddling the surgeries because they believe this indoctrination that if you have an idle ideation, oh, gee, if I had been born the opposite sex, then my life would be da-da-da-da-da, I would be more this, I would be less that. But literally, we know from detransitioners that the therapists, psychologists, whoever, are saying, oh, you'll become suicidal if you don't go on this path.
So we have a few viewers tonight. Let's talk about that real quick. They've got a couple of questions right in line with what we're discussing. So let's move on to some of them, because they're the ones that we're here to try to help as well along the way. So let's say hi to Pretty Weird Duck. Pretty Weird Duck says hello and says hi, Ute. Patty's online, Patty P. So thank you, Patty, for joining us. Hey, Ute, she says. Pretty Weird Duck says, they're sensitive and they overreact when they don't get their way. And you've seen that and you've talked about that before many times, Ute. But then breast implants is not a one and done surgery. We talked about that. Every 10 years, you got to get new ones. But then this is where we were just discussing that Pretty Weird Duck says, what does mental health for terrible husbands like them look like?
Okay. So just very briefly, my little chronology of this was that I discovered his 3 cross-dressing diaries in August of 1992 when our 2 children were 1 and 4. I was still nursing, breastfeeding the 1-year-old. He came back from a trip, a so-called business trip from where he went to San Francisco with all of his body hair shaved off. Arms, legs, chest, everything. And he was telling me, that's none of my business. That's how I want to look. This is my new look. And I was like, okay, what's going on? And at some opportune point, I reached into his suitcase, which he had told me not to go into. And it's like, when you have little kids, who tells their wife, oh, my suitcase is packed, if you can't fit the children's socks and extra diapers, don't use my suitcase, right? Nobody does that. So I was like, okay, that's Pandora's box. And I found this, it's pretty clear to me that his cross-dressing went back into that pregnancy with the second child, into that time, because he was going to graduate school for an MBA at New York University, spending family money on that tuition. And so because he had some suicide threats and stuff like that, about 6 weeks later, I bolted with the children and stayed with my parents for a few months. He detransitions. He criticized the therapist who subsequently he went back to her, but this person who's really not even qualified. There's a lot of charlatan stuff going on that in the history of this, trans diagnosis field. And he coerced me to come back. He said he wanted to separate our children and take the older one if I didn't come back. And I, he grew a beard and everything. And he said that he would accuse me of making it all up because I didn't have any proof, because I didn't have any of the diaries. I couldn't figure out how to, make a copy. I should have ripped some off and stuffed it into my pants, at the time that I discovered it, but I didn't have any proof of that. So I was coerced into going back in January of 1993, and subsequently found out that in 7 months later, in July of 1993, he went to a PhD psychologist, who is Dr. Connie in my book, and she diagnosed him in one appointment. 1993, it's this idea that it's this slow process and it's this Blanchard's 2 years, da-da-da. No. They were never doing this. And first of all, the whole diagnosis is based on very, very flawed sexist ideas. So, and it just happens that my ex-husband had been abused by his father, who I think was a little autistic or had OCD when Nettie was quite a young child. And he had two younger sisters. I mean, there are probably some patterns of having opposite sex siblings, different kind of things where this idea comes up that is, and then the retcon that they do of, oh yes, when I was a child, I had this fantasy, all this stuff, which they're, some of it is basically making it up because you want this letter so desperately, you're getting glorified, all this stuff. So, so then we go on and on and on, and finally it's the end of March 1995. I've suffered through a couple of years of, not knowing where he is sometimes and stuff like that. And then I discover, based on finally seeing him for the first time in a few weeks without a shirt on, and I realized he must be taking estrogen, and he lied to me. He started doing this again. And I said, it's over. The day that I realized that was the day before our younger son's 4th birthday party. So I got to walk through this party, which I had made the cupcakes for and stuff, from scratch, with a mask of a smile on my face, right? Pretending. And then, so that was 1995. I got him to move out in June of 1995. And this is, it turns out that this is a pretty classic pattern of deceit, of lying with the cooperation, supervision, and praise of this specialized therapist. See, the therapists are also sort of glorified, and so it's really it's very cult-like. It's this,
those therapists are going to also gaslight.
Yes, that
so
happens
really,
directly.
they're piling on. They're just wearing the wives down to begin to accept this.
Right. And it's interesting because, I've talked to a couple of women who are butch lesbians, right? And their take is, they come in, they want to take over our women-only spaces. They, they're very dominant still. They're not acting like a woman who was socialized to be so agreeable and compassionate and all this stuff. It's sanctioned narcissism, which damages everyone. So I was wondering if you want me to just quickly read through my data now on the.
I think that would be excellent. Again, if any wife that's been betrayed by any of these deviant cross-dressing men, so a trans widow, and as you say, there's a criteria. She can't be with them because she's in danger. She's still under the gaslighting. It's just not a good scenario. So as long as she has left separated, then she can participate. And so you're looking for additional women to participate in this.
And I, to tell you the truth, I also have to be cautious for my own safety, because a lot of these dudes are in the tech field, and I'm sort of nervous that they can figure out where I am and what my actual given name is, and set up something against me. So so far nothing like that has happened, but that's why you really need to be out of there. And there are even trans widows who have been out of it for a few years who it takes them some time to be able to really tell the truth about what happened, right? And that's, I think, and I actually give a caution when I send the survey, 20 questions to ask a trans widow, to any woman who requests it. I caution that, bringing up all these memories will probably put you in a certain kind of mood. It might make you feel pretty fragile. So you can plan to just answer 3 questions at a time. I will take the responses, any which way like that. Typically, they want to answer all 20 when they figured it out. But I said, make a plan to meet a good, supportive friend afterward, go for a walk, make plans for yourself. What, you're bringing this back up. That's really a therapeutic process,
They're suffering from PTSD.
PTSD.
There's no way around this. These men are very abusive, psychologically abusive, if not physically abusive.
Right. So the first question is, was his cross-dressing a revelation or your discovery? And it's about half and half. So, and the thing is, if it's a revelation, it's a certain kind of crass, he tells you this, I'm doing this, and it doesn't matter what you feel about it, right? Or like me, if you discover it, that's, it's in any case, it's a lot of deception, but it's something, to think about. How did you find out? And also, if it's a discovery and he's like my husband, like my ex, if he's been going to a therapist, that therapist has been participating in the deceit. And unfortunately, sometimes these people are women. And so, I harbor a certain amount of justified resentment against this woman that I call Ruth the charlatan, and the PhD psychologist that did the one appointment diagnosis, who I call Dr. Connie. Okay, number 2 is, did he tell you it's under control and not frequent, and then it escalated out of control? 31. And so that's a little over half. And for some of the women, they left right away, so they weren't there to see if it escalated out of control. She got out right away. So that's, but the reason I ask that is because some women, you could say that he said he detransitioned all this. He said it was a mistake. It was a midlife crisis. He went to somebody incompetent. He wrote this letter to my father saying all this stuff to get me to come back, but then he goes back to those people. But in a way, then it did escalate, right? In my situation. So I'm a yes on that. The third one is, did he select a therapist, and did that therapist or he claim that your marriage is now a lesbian relationship? So that's 1/4 of us. 15 of us have had to listen to someone tell us that you're a lesbian now. Now, one thing I wanted to bring up that is something that I've only really in the last few months become aware of, and this is this phenomenon of what they call polyamory, which is sanctioned affairs. And I think that another factor, especially for the younger trans widows now, who are finding out about their husbands, goings-ons, then the therapists and the husband and, various sectors of society are saying, well, you'll just be in a polyamorous relationship, right? You'll just, then you can find, and that's what was suggested to me when I went for my one appointment with Ruth the charlatan after the discovery finally in 1995. I went for one appointment to her, and she suggested that he would be not upset if I decided to, if we just had a so-called open marriage, and I could have, a boyfriend or something like that. And I just sort of said, I remember thinking, I used to be a professional dancer, and there were men who thought they were in love with me, and, men can fall in love with women, and they have strong feelings, and how is that fair to them? I just thought, why, And then a couple of them have actually turned around where this happened. And then a couple of those cross-dressing men have turned around and sued the wife for divorce on the grounds of infidelity. So just, don't buy that Brooklyn Bridge, okay? Number 4, did he put money in a secret account or other venue and spend it on wardrobe, makeup, electrolysis, etc.? And did he incur credit card debt for his spending? So this person on Twitter, her concern about the debt and money and everything is serious. So 24 of us know about this. There are a certain number of people who don't know because, again, they got out, they figured out the financial split, they, didn't know. But that's a significant number of us. Did he wear your clothing or makeup? 27. So that's almost half. Did he, and I honestly, I don't know. With my ex, I don't remember finding any stretched out stuff, and he was bigger than me, so seems to me it would be stretched out, but I don't know. I had maternity clothes. I had the different outfits that were bigger, because I had just given birth to one of our two children, and I hadn't, wasn't back into my size 8, Okay, so did he suggest, this is number 6, did he suggest, coerce, or cajole you into sex role play whereby you are to use a strap-on, that is a fake penis, and play the male part in bed? Yes is 21. Yeah. Did a therapist suggest any of that? That's yes, 6. So that's 10%.
So much for therapeutic neutrality.
Yeah.
I want to step in a therapist right now. If you're suggesting that to a wife, you are not neutral. You're allowing your values to be interjected into the marital relationship.
Well,
therapist's role is not to get involved in any.
Well, it's a degradation of marriage.
Absolutely, it is.
It's
Absolutely.
just, what this therapist, Ruth, the charlatan, said was to me in that one in-person thing was, she said, "Oh, you're spunky and so traditional," and I was like, "I'll take it."
Look at how mocking that is. That's not.
I know. Real
that's
put
not
down. Real put down. Cash only. Non-certified therapist. Okay, here we go. Did he defame or vilify you in affidavits submitted to court, or defame you on social media or to friends? And, in some cases, it's your own family. That is 28. And some are unknown because they move so far away that they don't know. So that's almost half of us. And then did he claim to any therapist or group of friends or anybody that you abused him verbally or physically? 15, so that's 1/4. And that stayed consistent. That's one of the ones that stayed consistent. Number 10, important one, did he attack you physically? Whether it was choking, shoving, Okay, 18, so that's almost 1/3 who were physically attacked. He cross-dressing guy, and once in a while, it's when he's wearing that lingerie because he's acting out what he's seen on.
That's domestic violence right there.
Right. Yes. And none of them, in 0 cases, was there. In a couple of cases, police were called, and in no cases did he get charged, or was there a court case against him? Yeah, because the police don't want to deal with this. They don't want to have the ACLU or whoever, So number 11, did he force unwanted sex with you? This is pretty bad. 24. More than 1/3. Not just between 1/4 and 1/3. 24. Close to it.
That's an interesting one because as someone, Ute, just hearing that, right? If I'm taking that, do they force, right? You can gaslight someone, so these men can gaslight their wives to such an extent they agree, then they don't think they were forced. So coercion and force are very similar.
And it's often for calling him by his actual name, saying you're not a woman. Why are you asking the children to call you mama something? Like normal things that a woman.
That's such psychological abuse to kids.
Yeah.
Did I miss the question of their age? Like, what's the median age for this transition that's happening with a lot of these men? Is it 20 years old? Is it 30, 40, 50?
Listen, I specifically avoided questions about him, except for what he did, that affected you. It's all over the map. It's all over the map, but of course, there's a lot of young ones. I'm shocked. I find it so shocking. So many young trans widows who have a young child who are in their early 30s.
That's the porn industry leading the way right there.
Yes,
that's the deviation of the porn industry.
So.
Yeah.
Yes, it's that, and plus the cult, the love bombing, the all of a sudden, it's often guys in tech now. There are affinity groups in Google, in the big tech companies. There are affinity groups that are internal email things where guys who cross-dress can can get together in their, find work people. It's sanctioned by the workplace, right? So that they, like, oh, who plays golf? Who might want to go for a Saturday golf game? Who cross dresses? Who might want to go out dressed up Thursday nights? I don't know. Okay.
Pretty
so
weird. One more thing here before you go back. Pretty Weird Duck says most of the husbands transition after they go through puberty, right? I mean, they're husbands, so we're not talking about 17 and 18-year-olds getting married and
These
still
are
in
adults.
puberty and going through any of that.
And typically the wife had no idea before she married. I had no idea. So did you live below the poverty line or require governmental or family financial assistance at any time after the end of the relationship? I had to make this question so long because there are women, they're trying to be so honest. And there were women who said, well, I got governmental assistance, so I wasn't really living below the poverty line. And it's like, yes, actually, that's the definition. You have to be poor to get governmental assistance. So I had to structure the question like that. Or require financial assistance, from family. It means that you are financially, unstable and you've been thrown into this by dude. Okay, 24. So, did any members of the clergy, priests, rabbis, suggest that you give in to his requests so that you can keep your marriage and family together?
Keep it together.
Yeah. Six members of the clergy. In 10% of the cases, the clergy is involved gaslighting the wife. Oh, my goodness.
I want to speak to any pastor. How dare you?
Right.
How dare you not understand?
I literally had to tell a rabbi once when I was the only other person in the conversation and say, I don't say she for Nettie. Nettie is the father of my children and was my husband, and because you saw us. Please don't say that. Please don't say she and stuff.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, not an Orthodox rabbi, obviously. Right. So, but
for any Christian pastor out there, read Romans chapter 1.
But there are quite a lot. That's right.
Romans chapter 1 is very clear what happens in this downward progression into deviance. Do not ever place the blame and responsibility on the victim, on the survivor, on the oppressed. That is the wife. She needs support.
Yeah, and this is typically some religious Christian women sometimes stay together like Tracy Shannon. And pray. They're praying, and I mean, she pushed him. Yeah. She was pushed down the stairs by him.
Yeah. In fact, Tracy is going to be on in a couple of weeks.
Oh, good. Yeah, yes.
Wonderful. You two are my heroes.
Yes, thank you. It's mutual.
So wait a minute. Hold on. The best solution here, and this is coming from Pretty Weird Duck, the best solution is to leave the marriage rather than try to fix it and somehow even fix the husband. That's like almost, you can't get past that. I'm sure that you're better off to just walk away, as the duck is saying.
Yes, it's
waddle out of there.
You could be in danger. I mean, my data tells you that you could be in danger for your physical safety. Did anyone, family, therapist, him, or whatever, suggest that you are now obligated to share Mother's Day? Five of us. And of course, only, I think it's just over half, or 34 or so, who have children. Quite a few don't have children. But so, then it's not applicable for some of the women. But the thing is, I know, for example, my children were quite young. At the end of the school year in elementary school, the teachers all have you make first the Mother's Day gifts and then the Father's Day gifts. And my kids were encouraged by the teachers, and I couldn't really do anything about it. They made 2 Mother's Day gifts and he refused to do anything for Father's Day after 1995.
See, that's why these guys are so self-absorbed, so narcissistic, so
yes.
porn saturated that they have the nerve to foist it upon their kids.
Oh, yes.
No guy of honor does this. No normal dad does this. Puts his kids through a lifetime of trauma because they're so self-absorbed. These are not nice men. These are deviant guys that are self-absorbed and narcissistic and sociopathic, quite frankly.
Right. And several women have been told by several of the trans widows have been told by their own therapist, oh, you're going to have to get over that Mother's Day thing.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what they need to get over. They need to get over having abused someone so that they can finally free these women and these families. They need to.
Yeah.
They've gotten over their conscience, so they need to get their conscience back.
Right. Well, they've decided that these men are more important.
Yeah, they're finding themselves. Well, you know what?
And, I mean, one other point that I've started making is that you can't manufacture through surgery the nerve endings in the female reproductive system. We have all these nerve endings. And no surgeon can do that. And as a matter of fact, it's definitely going to be all messed up with scar tissue. Okay, here we go. Question number 15. Here we are. In your own individual therapy, did mental health professionals tell you that he's to be referred to as female, get over this, blah, blah? 9. 9 of us. Yeah. So, and then there were other variations of that, like the therapist doesn't make the client, the trans widow, say she for her ex-husband, but the therapist refers in the therapy for her, for the trans widow, the therapist repeatedly refers to dude as she. And they're also afraid, they're all afraid because they can get reported and somebody could be, slipping in incognito, trying to out a therapist or whatever. I tell people, go to an older woman who's close to retirement. Like I had this. I was shopping for a therapist at a certain point, and I got a call back from someone, and I said, okay, this is my situation, and I have PTSD, and I'm thank goodness I'm really quite a bit better. And I give you guys credit as being supportive and helping me through all this. But that potential therapist said to me, well, of course, she's a woman now. And she's been for 30 years. So of course of course we're going to have to do that. And I said, okay, I haven't even hired you yet, but I'm firing you now.
Good for you.
And I wrote a letter to that agency, and I got a letter back from the director saying, well, if you ever change your mind, our door is open.
There's a school of therapy called reality therapy. Bill Glasser is the kind of the founder of that. So it doesn't help anyone to have therapy that is skewed toward non-reality. There's XXXY chromosomes. It's as basic as biology 101. If you veer off of that, you're going nowhere good other than feeding the ego and feeding the selfishness of narcissism.
Yes. And other people have often, I know this just anecdotally, that I know it in my case with my ex-husband. There's somebody who had worked with him in this tech field of database management who emailed me out of the blue and said, oh, is this so-and-so? Is your ex-husband so-and-so using his real name? And I was like, uh-oh. and I just responded, well, I don't know exactly how to respond to this. I'm not quite sure. What kind of, connection do you have to him? And he said, basically, he's a real jerk. And all of us who have worked with him know this, but it's all hidden under a veil of inclusivity and diversity.
And saying that he's a jerk is another way of saying he's self-centered. He's selfish.
Oh, yes.
Narcissistic.
What did he say? He said, actually, literally, there's a meanness, coldness to him.
100%.
But it's all veiled under this DEI stuff.
And that is why we have to unmask this crap.
Right. Yes. because it's sort of narcissistically abusing everyone.
Of course it is.
No.
Of course it is.
Now, this is a big one. Did you lose a set of friends after he came out or after the relationship ended? 27. So that's about half of us. Did he start self-identifying as mother of the children that he fathered? 16. 16 of these dudes have to other people and in front of the children said that he's the mother. Right? So that's mother erasure, plain and simple.
And you consign those kids to the future life of counseling to try to figure out
And what's really terrible is I know that my children at this point don't talk to me because I'm too honest about all of this, and they regard it as dangerous for them. And there was a troll who contacted them once. It was pretty awful, but
it's okay for dad to live a lie, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
wow.
But they've been brainwashed. They both work in tech, and so do both of their wives, and they've been brainwashed and indoctrinated that they have to go along with this. They both have indicated to me that they got themselves into therapy. It's all my fault. If only I had tried to stay and keep the family together. And
there you go. No matter what the kind of crud this guy's doing, it's your responsibility to just suck it up and deal with it.
Right.
To keep the peace.
Right. And so, I feel for them. I am hoping that, in however many years it takes for this cult to be unmasked, that when it is debunked as a diagnosis, I'm hoping that they might, get back in touch with me. But I send them letters saying, I still love you. I'm your mother. I will always love you. And, sometimes I give them news about the cast review or something that, the detransitioner is saying they got liver failure or whatever, I think it's entirely possible that that my ex might be starting to have some mental difficulties and stuff with 30 years on estrogen and stuff. I was wondering, do they have the guy go through menopause? Do they lower his estrogen when he turns 55 or something? I really don't know. So 16 of us had the dude saying he's the mother. Did he insist or suggest that the children call him mama something? That was 12, so more than 10%, and more than 10%, or more than whatever percent it is. I don't know. I'm just 12 out of 60. I don't want to do percents until I have 100, basically. Did a therapist or he or relatives tell you that your rejection of him and ending that relationship caused him to decide to live as female full time? 6 of us.
Yeah, rejection.
6 of us, and it's like, huh? But I had nothing to do with it, So, and then did he co-opt your experience of childbirth, using the details of your labor to convince new friends of his female status? And some don't know, but 6 of us that happened, including me. Because I had 2... I felt like saying to these, it happened to be women in both cases. There were 2 women who were gaslit enough, or maybe needed new glasses or something, or hearing aids, who came up to me and said, "Why are your children calling you mom? You're not their mom. You're one of them said, you're the nanny." And I thought, oh, here I am, 36 years old, and she thinks I'm 22 or something? Oh my goodness, I should take that as a compliment. But she said that in front of my children. And so I immediately talked about natural labor and having contractions and all this stuff and said, that other parent is their father, and that's all I'm going to say now in front of the children because this is getting tricky for me, but I felt like lady. And this was this very artsy kind of, woke person in Park Slope, Brooklyn, and I just thought, wow, and who I'm sure considered herself a feminist, what about the real woman, the real mother, whatever. Yeah. So that's all 20 questions.
So, Ute, I've got something for you that that we should probably ask because a Pretty Weird Duck brought it up, and it's a great question.
Yes.
This will probably put a little more work on your plate, but there's a flip side to this, and that's what Pretty Weird Duck is getting at with this question. Do you know if there are similarities to men who lose their wives when the wives transition to become a trans man?
I have sent the 20 questions to a man that had this happen.
Right?
And I said, some of them won't be relevant, but you could just change the question about using the word mother to father or dad, daddy, papa, whatever. And did she narcissistically insist on that? I think that there are some men who are abused similarly. Mm-hmm. And that's a mess. And I think, it's especially a mess. I mean, it's just testosterone in the female system is so damaging. It's so damaging.
Doesn't belong there.
It's just, yeah. So, this is, I mean, one of the things that I can get sort of exercised about is the fact that, my ex-husband, I'm sure, in the summer of 1996, when he went to Stanford University Medical to do these surgeries, I know that he signed a form because that's a very serious surgery, hours and hours, He was gone for 5 weeks. Mm-hmm. He must have signed a form before they put him under to say, I recognize that my life could be threatened, and I'm signing a form that I have been told that, and I still want this. And when you have children, I just feel like, don't do surgeries unless they're medically necessary, right? Mm-hmm. I have had 2 pretty serious surgeries where I had to sign that form. One was to remove a benign bone tumor off the top of my head, which had grown to be about the size of a half of a golf ball. I had to part my hair differently and stuff.
Wow.
And so, of course, when I specifically was afraid that I knew that it was growing for a few years, but my children, I waited until both children were over 18 to even bring it up with a doctor. And then, of course, they wanted me to, get the surgery like right away. And I remember the neurosurgeon, saying, well, I can get you in next Thursday. I really want to do this. And they don't want to tell you how dangerous it is. Like, because the thing is, it was right above an artery. So it could have, if it, pressed and caused a bleed or something, then I'd be gone in 10 minutes. But So he really wanted to do this, and he was really, excited about this surgery because it's an easy one. The bone tumor is not inside next to your brain. It's outside. So that's a more easy one. So, surgeons like to do surgery. I saw that, but this was absolutely medically necessary. Right. So I was getting headaches and so on, and it was possibly going to endanger my life. And so I remember saying to the surgeon, well, my children are a couple of hours away, both at college, and do you think I could do it in 2 weeks? Because I'd really like to go see my children first. And right away, without hesitation, he said, yes, you should go to see your children first. And it's sort of like, right, because you want to do that in case you don't wake up, okay? And the other one, I had a fibroid the size of my fist removed. I guess my body at certain points wanted to grow benign tumors. And I could have died from bleeding out from that too, if it detached. No, I went to a very, very high specialist, one of the top in the world, and he did laparoscopic surgery and removed it without removing my uterus. And a couple of decades, or even 1 decade before that was 2008, they might have done a hysterectomy. So, but, women have these things. Women have tumors that grow in their ovaries or in their uterus, or, and women's health is something that needs to be specifically studied. And I feel that these men who are taking over the surgeons and everything are, usurping female identity. There are some of them who are insisting on going to a gynecologist. They don't have female organs. Why do they want to go to a gynecologist and sit, like
the cult-like nature of this?
Yeah, like there was a doctor in France, a gynecologist in France, who point blank said to this dude, I can't do anything for you because I'm a gynecologist and I only deal with women's bodies and women's problems. And he kind of got canceled and had to do this big apology and say, oh, I'm so sorry. And of course I would see some dude take a look and, have him, that's nuts. That makes a female exam that none of us love, okay? None of us love those female exams, and I'm sure men, none of the, just like a woman who takes testosterone and stuff, she's never going to have to go to a proctologist. She's never going to go, she doesn't have a prostate, okay? She's not going to, like men too have specific difficulties that have to do with the male body. It's wrong to identify into that which you are physically not. It is just wrong. And the surgeon, see, it's this thing where the dovetail between the surgeons and the psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever, who are doing those diagnoses and writing those letters and being the sales reps for the surgeons, they are saying, oh, I'm an expert. I know all about this person's psychology. And of course, we need to bring them over to you so that you can cut off stuff and interfere with their urinary tract and all this dangerous stuff that then like, why aren't doctors saying, okay, too many of these people, both males and females, too many of these are coming to the emergency room and they're going to be monopolizing 3 nurses and 4 doctors. And there's a sick child with a high fever that we're not going to get to because these unnecessary operations that are for an ideation, a psychiatric illness, are monopolizing the health system. And if you ask me, this is, I'm no socialist, but I'm waiting for Canada to catch up with Sweden. But see, these
I got to ask something. You make it sound like there's millions of people out there that have done this, and they're not stepping up. If there's millions, this isn't going to affect the hospitals the way you're talking about. I really do have a problem with what you're saying at this point because I just don't see that bombardment of the trans movement enveloping our hospitals and our doctors in a way that there's that many to be able to do that.
Even if it's one baby that has to wait a couple of hours.
At a hospital, I agree, you're going to have to do, but again, there's it doesn't matter where you live, there's not going to be 30 of them sitting in the waiting room tonight to go in.
Do you understand that there are people who have gone to the ER after these surgeries 6 times to emergency? 6 times.
Right.
Like it doesn't need to be, all these millions of people because they have to go back to the ER repeatedly. I
agree. They're in a perpetual loop of fixing themselves and trying to heal, and they're open wounds.
And they actually, after the surgeries, post-surgery, they have much higher suicidal ideation. So again, that is sort of taking up the resources. And what the comment that I was going to make about the Scandinavian countries is, I'm seeing them put the brakes. All of them. Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland. The only holdout is Iceland, for some reason. Really weird. They are putting the brakes on transitioning minors. Mm-hmm. And they're saying that a different kind of talk therapy and other physiotherapy things and delving into whether there's trauma or abuse in the past and stuff is what needs to be done.
The CAS report opened up a lot of doors for stopping this. There's no question about that.
Right.
And, you know, that came out of South Dakota, and it continues on around the United States right now. So we had Fred Deutsch on the show a couple of weeks ago and had a great talk with him. So, you know, we agree with you. It's not that we're against what you're saying, and I'm not against what you're saying, but
No, I think
I just don't want to. I don't want to blow up the fact that you know, this is going to overwhelm everything. I mean, it's almost like the way that they presented COVID. Oh, the hospitals are full. The emergency rooms are full. It's like, but wow, listen, we can't over embellish this stuff.
Yes. But I take your point. But when you think about the indoctrination that's going on in the schools now, and kids who are starting to identify as the opposite sex because it seems cool. You know, if they go down that route, and we know that there are detransitioners who were exactly channeled like that. You know, Chloe Cole, Prisha Mosley, there's all these. And so, you know, I see also this connection with men like my ex, the married men who suddenly do this, and the retcon, the rearrangement of their past, that they thought that they were the opposite sex when they were a child. So that therefore we need to address this with children so the children will feel better, you know, and I do see it as a potential drain on the resources. The other thing that I see, well, I guess one reason that I talk like this, Brad, is that this occupied such a huge part of my brain and my psyche when I was trying to get my children through this. Now, the other sort of anecdotal data.
Well, that's actually, you just brought something up that I agree with 1,000% that I never thought of until you mentioned it, which is this isn't just one person going to the doctor now. This is 4 and 5 and 6 people out of a family that all need that help. And that is where maybe I've overstepped my bounds, but thank you for correcting me on that, because that is something that I never even thought of. It never came into my mind that everybody needs to be fixed. Everybody needs help that's within that family dynamic when a parent does such a dramatic, you know, transition.
Because it's cultured narcissism. It's planting the seeds of narcissism. I mean, the siblings, I've profiled about 4 siblings of a brother who is ideating that he's a female, and they just usurp all of the money, all of the space, it becomes the project. That's what cults do. It makes it this thing. And see, the thing is, like, I guess one reason that that I say it in the stark way that I do is, for example, there are now cases of women, like older ladies like me, wearing the T-shirt from Kelly J. Keene that just says the dictionary definition of women, or some statement like that, and they wear it into the clinic where they're getting treated for something. I think one is in Canada, and I know that there's another case. I can't really say the specifics, but there have been a couple of women who were denied their own health care because they wore something that indicated that they don't believe anybody can change their sex. And there was a doctor in, I think, Massachusetts, who put out a statement. They took it down. It was from some clinic in Massachusetts, and he put out a statement that they will refuse to treat anyone, even if they're elderly and, you know, opinionated. They will refuse to treat any patient who comes in and says, "Oh, that's not really a woman," about somebody else.
And that's really the bottom line issue for as many guys that may go for need medical assistance and so forth. And so therefore, utilizing limited resources,
Yeah.
which is a concern.
Now, just let me bring up one more thing. As you know, I had cataract surgery, big success, and now for this, don't have to wear glasses and so on. But I actually had maybe irrational fear, but I don't know how irrational it really was. I had the surgeries done in Brooklyn. I had a fear that, not the doctor, because I had met the surgeon several times, but I had a fear that, of course, the anesthesiologist you don't meet before you go into surgery. They're just there. And then the nurse, the OR nurse, I was afraid that it might be a Nettie. It might be someone like my ex-husband that I could recognize right away, even with my bad pre-op eyesight, and that it would just make me feel ill, or that I would know how narcissistic and preoccupied that person would be, that maybe they would make a mistake, And so because there are a number of them that are doctors, Marcy Mark Bowers and so on. And so to me, that's, for example, La Leche League is all of a sudden, the breastfeeding organization is all of a sudden kind of infiltrated with these men who want to breastfeed, and they're taking the word woman and mother out of their literature.
Just a bunch of deviant guys.
But it's also the women who are saying that they're men, but I mean, any woman who is taking testosterone should not be breastfeeding a baby, but, so, I mean, it's just really a brave new world. We don't know anything. There's several articles. There was some, crazy trans professor doing so-called research saying that, we don't really know if a female really has to stop taking testosterone if she accidentally gets pregnant and decides to carry the baby. We really don't know. We don't have any research. And it's like, okay, are we just going to wait, like with diethylstilbestrol, DES, wait until those female babies, grow up and find out a generation later that they're going to have cervical cancer or be infertile, or the males have cancer, or, testicular cancer? God knows, right? I mean, the doctors should be putting their foot down and saying, no, I don't think in that case, I think it would be ethical to say, you can't be my patient because I can't do something this experimental.
That's right. That's another facet of the concerns of this. We're aware of the time constraints, but suffice it to say, in looking at all these different facets, the one thing that is absolutely across the board clear is that this ruse, this grand scam and scheme, has its foundation in the manipulation of the psyche of the wives and the kids. And that is where the primary harm is being done. And Brad, just as you indicated, if you have a selfish guy that decides he wants to do whatever he wants to do, fill in the blank, but in this case, he wants to cross-dress, and then he wants to make everybody else have to go along with his statement so that he can feel better about himself, you have now screwed up. You've intellectually manipulated and emotionally harmed. You've negatively impacted that entire family, and that is just a narcissistic guy who is just unbelievable, the harm that is being wrought by these selfish guys and those that are facilitating this.
I'll just even say one last thing, that, in a lot of meetings in all over the place where they don't consider themselves, religious Christians or conservatives or something like that, they do this ritualistic thing of saying, oh, my name is Ute and my pronouns are she, her. So you've got all these people together, and they're wasting and to do something for the community and make some decisions. How are we going to spend the money, or what do we need to do for children, or something like this? And they're wasting, a certain percent of their meeting saying something stupid. Just a friend of mine here in my town, works for this sort of a dance organization, and she goes to a lot of community meetings and stuff. They do a lot of services, after school programs, all this kind of stuff. And she said they will all be straight and not ideating that they are the opposite sex or non-binary or anything like that. And they ritualistically go around saying what their pronouns are. And they all know each other. They could just start the meeting and get home to their families sooner.
Honestly.
Well, there's always more to cover. We'll never get to the end of this anytime soon. There's just so much embedded into this whole topic of trans widows and everything else. I want to make sure I say hi to Beatrix tonight. She's been online with us. Well, thank you very much for being here, Beatrix. We've read a few of your comments. I never mentioned your name. I apologize for that. Typically, we get a little bit of a break in. Ute's got lots of information, as you can see, that she's full of comments and full of information that, people need readily available to get the help that they need. Beatrix maybe getting the last word in here tonight before I kind of wrap things up. She says, I refuse to say preferred pronouns. It's demanded pronouns, mandatory pronouns.
That's right.
John, anything you want to talk about next week's show? We've got another Sunday night Q&A coming up next week. Let's talk a little bit about that before we wrap up tonight.
We sure do. And again, Ute, thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you.
And again, if any ex-wife who's been through this, where her husband suddenly went deviant, or not suddenly, but eventually did this, if they want to participate in that survey, they can reach out to you, or they can reach out to us and we'll forward that to you. Next week, next episode, we have Alvin Louie of Courage is a Habit. This is a perfect fit. It dovetails because his specialty is helping people understand how perpetrators, predators, manipulators, cult leaders, and all those pushing this ideation know how to weaponize our empathy, our sympathies. They weaponize the language and they tie us up in knots. And that fits into also that diversity, exclusivity, inclusion, all this. And so all that is being weaponized, manipulated, and on a society level, parents are left confused. They doubt themselves. And so Alvin Louie is a master at helping embolden us to keep us grounded in reality. And he does a wonderful job. And it's a perfect dovetail from Ute, as you've helped us see once again. These are narcissistic men that are sexually deviant that are doing great harm to wives and kids.
And John, we're here for the protection of both women and children. One of our viewers just came on. His name is Blahaj. Hello, Chad. Is this a transphobic stream? I've got a real question because I'm just joining in.
Oh, yeah. But transphobic, I'll tell you what, we're not phobic against anything. You are Veritas phobic. You are phobic against the truth. There's XXXY. Do not try to manipulate. This is classic. Okay. Don't you dare start running your mouth and try to divert issues away from the protection of women and children. You narcissistic male. You're not going to do that. And that's the reality. So stop your pornography, do a little self-reflection, and get off a channel that's here to help support women and children. So go peddle your papers, go hang out with other deviant guys, and don't try to flip that on us, because we're all about protecting women and children on this channel.
Anything you want to say, Blaj, before you go? I'll
we've
give you
heard enough
30
of him.
seconds
You know
to
what?
just
He
chime
needs
in
to
with a
stop-
comment if you've got one.
He needs to stop his pornography, stop wearing women's underwear, and start trying to figure out what the heck drove him to start cross-dressing in the first place. So we don't have time to deal with the likes of him. So he's into pornography and he wants to justify it.
Well, one of the best comments I think I've read in the chat tonight was John and Brad, don't mince words, and we're definitely not doing that now.
Hey,
So
I'm telling you. So.
Right.
thank you, everybody, for participating tonight. Thank you all for being here. There's a lot more to come. You can catch us every Sunday night, 9 o'clock Eastern. Please come back next week for Alvin Louie. Ute, thank you very much for being here. John, always a pleasure having you on the program since it is your show after all. I'm Brad Wilder. Till next time, everyone, we look forward to seeing you. And remember, it's not our kids' fight, it's our fight. So get in the fight and join today.